Hi, everybody. This review video here is just over a couple of topics that I covered in class last week. For some of you guys that were here, and for those of you guys that were at home online learning, I want to review this a little bit with you. This won't take me too long. But one of the concepts, or one of the topics, I should say, that was in your assignment over the weekend was to read an article about a place called Easter Island. And Easter Island, the reason why I want to kind of spend a few minutes in this video talking about it is sometimes there's AP questions about Easter Island as far as like understanding sort of what happened there and sort of that it kind of acts as sort of a microcosm to what's kind of going on the planet today. So just a little background here. If you read that article, in the article, they talked a little bit about the original natives, the original settlers on the island around 1,000 years ago. And if you're not really sure where Easter Island is, it's this little tiny place in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, kind of off the western coast of South America. But 1,000 years ago, Easter Island was kind of a lush tropical paradise. I mean, plenty of trees, plenty of fertile soil, kind of an ideal place, I suppose, to start a civilization. Good climate, etc. But when the natives got there, when they settled on the island, one of the things that they started to do was they started, like most civilizations you would probably imagine, they started to use all of the natural resources. So they started to overuse, for example, wood. They cut down all their trees, use them not only as like a fuel source, like for firewood and things like that, but also for shelters and building how or building huts and things like that. They overused their soil. There was fertile soil there, but one thing about soil is whenever you plant things, it eventually kind of ruins the upper layer of the soil. So you have to constantly turn it upside down so that you can use it over and over again. Well, if they didn't quite understand what they were doing agriculturally, it would have been really easy for them to have just overused the soil and kind of rendering it sort of useless. So the thing about Easter Island was, they had resources available to them, but they just didn't use them in a very sustainable way. And eventually, the whole island was just kind of a mess. I mean, they had no more wood. They didn't replant their trees. They overused their soil, and the whole place was just a mess. And eventually, what happened, if you read about it in the article, was their population numbers declined drastically. They had no food. They had no resources. They had to resort to cannibalism, and it was kind of like a total mess. So this was an example of at one time, having a very beautiful place to live with plenty of resources, and then all of a sudden, because they overused things and didn't live a sustainable lifestyle, then it ended up being catastrophic. So Easter Island is, kind of a good example, I guess, of what could happen if we're not careful. And I like to talk about that because, this year in this class, we're going to be talking about the earth and a lot of things that we're doing um, that don't really, I guess, pertain to living sustainable lifestyles. And if we keep doing things like that, I'm not saying the whole planet's going to turn into like an Easter Island, but who knows what could happen? We're already seeing a lot of problems on our planet due to things like deforestation and loss of habitat and things like that for animals, and polluting the ocean, air pollution, water pollution, etc. So there's a lot of signs that point to us not living sustainably right now, and we want to make sure that we kind of keep that in check so that, again, the planet doesn't get any worse than what it is right now. So again, the term sustainability, here's kind of the definition of it here. It says meeting the needs of our current generation without jeopardizing the needs of the future or future generations. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, we're going to have to use resources. We're going to have to use the land. We're going to have to use soil and water. But we want to make sure we do so in a way that doesn't deplete those resources for our kids and for our kids' kids and all that type of stuff. A really good example of this is energy. Electricity, for example. When you plug in your cell phone or turn on a microwave oven or turn on your TV, all that energy that comes into your home in the form of electricity, most of that stuff comes from coal energy. Burning coal, generating electricity. That's an example of a non-renewable resource. We're gonna run out of that. Coal is something that doesn't just you can't replant it, and have it grow back again. So, but we get most of our energy in this country from coal. So, but there's alternatives. We have things like wind energy, for example, hydroelectric power. Wind energy, I mean, that's a renewable thing. We're not going to like run out of wind anytime soon. So, I mean, maybe we can explore things like that instead of having to use up a resource that eventually we could run out of. Why don't we get the same commodity, electricity, for example, from a renewable resource? So we're going to talk a lot about things like that this year as well. Things that we can maybe do a little bit better in order to live again a more sustainable life. Defining human needs. I mean, I think this picture here, or these two pictures, I think kind of sums this up a little bit. If we're talking about living a sustainable life, I mean, just look at these two pictures. We've got your basic needs, things like, fresh air, good drinking water, you know, food, shelter, whatever. Those are just basic human needs. And, this family here on the bottom left probably are not living much above that. They've got some clothes, they've got a little straw hut here in the background. They probably live very simple lives. But let's say this family on the right, I think we all would agree they're probably living a little bit more beyond their basic needs. You know, Whatever. They got the in-ground pool, they got the tennis court. Like, look at this house. It probably has like 30 rooms in it. I mean, probably 8 bathrooms or something. I don't know. But I mean, think about if everybody on the planet lived like these people on the right, you know, versus these people on the left. The other day I asked you guys to do an ecological footprint activity, and in the United States, I think there's a lot more people in this country that are living maybe a little bit closer to this lifestyle on the right than they are the lifestyle on the left. I mean, are there some people in the U.S. that live very simple lives? Sure, but the more of a lifestyle that you live like this, your ecological footprint obviously is going to be a lot higher. So again, if you haven't done that activity yet, I know some of you guys that are in Group B are going to start that activity this week. But if you did it last week, what that footprint measures is basically the impact that you have on the environment. The higher the number, the higher the ecological footprint, the bigger the impact you have. And that's a negative thing. We want our ecological footprints to be fairly low. Right now, this is like the total footprint of everybody on Earth. It's about 14 billion hectares. Remember last week I said a hectare is about the size of a football field? So right now, everybody on this planet is using about 14 billion hectares worth of land, at least to survive. The problem is we've only got about 11 or 12 hectares of land currently on Earth. So we are actually using more sustainable land than we actually have. So we have to find a way to kind of tone that down a little bit. This is an interesting statistic or an interesting statement. It says if everyone on Earth lived like a U.S. citizen, 5 Earths would be needed just to sustain our lives. So, I mean, that is kind of crazy. I mean, luckily, not everybody on Earth lives a lifestyle of a typical American. Because if we did, we would need 5 Earths worth of land area, worth of resources just to accommodate us. So, this year when we talk about, sustainability and a lot of environmental problems on the planet, we have to kind of look at ourselves because we are kind of one of the biggest culprits when it comes to environmental problems. All right, I'm going to stop the video here, folks. Thanks for staying with me today. Make sure you check your agendas.